Let's do this. The Cult of Hockey podcast by the faithful and for the faithful. I'm David Staples of the Edmonton Journal, and I'm here tonight with Bruce McCurdy. Hey, Bruce.
Hey, David. How are you doing tonight?
I'm in a pretty good mood. How about you?
Yeah, I'm in a good mood.
Why are you in a good mood?
Bobby Lou retired, and Vancouver kind of got the short end of the goalie paddle there. A 3-year cap recapture at $3 million a year. How's that for a
That's
kick in the teeth?
Roberto Luongo.
Roberto Luongo, Bobby Lou.
So he's
retired after a great career, but he had one of those long-term contracts with the tail on it. And I think he only gave up like $1 million a year for the last 3 years. But because the averaged out cap hit was so much higher than that, Vancouver, especially, and a little bit Florida, got sacked with this cap recapture penalty.
You know who invented those long-term contracts? Ken Holland. Johan Franzen, I believe, was the first
to
get one of those. I think we called it the Franzenstein instead of Frankenstein contract. I think he was the first, if I'm not mistaken, to get that incredibly lengthy deal to spread out the cap hit, which was a way of circumventing the cap initially.
They're still paying him, I believe.
I'm also in a good mood, Bruce, and I'm in a good mood because come what may, the Oilers don't have the resources to make a terrible mistake on free agency day. And I'm doing a story on the 31 worst contracts of the new CBA era, which started in January 2013. And there are so many disastrous contracts handed out on July 1st, in July to UFAs. And the Oilers, of course, handed out at least one of them. And one of them made my list. It's the only one of the Oilers contracts. I mean, there's been some other bad ones by the Oilers in July. The Milan Lucic contract is 5th on the list. And no matter what, though, Bruce, they might overpay for someone, maybe Peter Mrazek, maybe Brett Connolly, but it's only going to be a bit of an overpay. And even if it's just like sometimes you sign a guy, like there's players who are signed and they're terrible from day one, like Dave Boland and Stephen Weiss. Players like that have signed these huge contracts and they've never been any good at all, even for a year for their new teams. But even if that worst came to worst, and I'm not saying it will be, and I'm not that much of a pessimist, but even if worst came to worst, like what Connolly's going to get 3-4 years and Mrazek the same thing. So, and you know, sometimes it works out too. I just think the UFA market is a really bad place to find players generally in this era where cap dollars are so precious. And with this Oilers team, if this team develops as it should, Bruce, they can't afford to have, and they're not going to have, you know, once the Lucic contracts comes off the books, which is some time from now. But I'm hoping that the cap situation on the Oilers opens up in years to come so they can keep most of the players that they're developing right now. You know, so Tyler Benson and Caleb Jones and Evan Bouchard, when they become excellent players, the Oilers can actually afford to keep them.
Right.
And they have to think about that now. And so when they're thinking about signing a Mrazek or a Connolly, that's got to be in their mind. Like maybe 3 years is the maximum, not 4, because 4 years might mean you're going to have to make a horrendous trade of a young player who you really want to keep, or trade away their contract, like Toronto just did Patrick Marleau for $6 million, his $6 million a year contract, and gave up a first-round draft pick. So
just to get rid of 1 year of Patrick Marleau.
Just to get rid of 1 year of the guy. And they did it because they're just up against it. They're desperate to keep some of these young players that they have. Mm-hmm. And Toronto has had a lot of bad signings over the years. You know, they had David Clarkson in 2013. They had Nikita Zaitsev, who's on my list, in 2017. Joffrey Lupul in 2013. Dion Phaneuf in 2013.
Ouch.
They've got more contracts on this list than any other team. Now, a lot of them, none of those contracts are Kyle Dubas contracts, including Zaitsev. I think he was just the assistant GM. He was part of the regime, but he didn't pull the trigger on that one. So I'm not blaming him. but he's got to deal with it, and it's painful. So,
Just
Bruce,
like Ken Holland's got to deal with the mess that he inherited from Peter Chiarelli. And the thing about the Luongo contract, before we move on, so I saw a Vancouver fan rationalizing that at least now because of this, they probably can't afford to spend $8 million a year on Tyler Myers. So maybe it's a good thing that they have this cap recapture that's actually preventing them from doing something even more stupid.
That fan's thinking like I'm thinking. I mean, if you're with a team where you're used to where stupid is the norm, you have dark thoughts like that.
Yes.
But it's not just stupid teams that do this. It's lots of teams do this. I mean, the number 7 contract on my list is Brent Seabrook.
Man.
He signed an 8-year deal for $6.8 million. And it's going to turn out he'll have had one near peak season of those 8. And the other 7 are going to be like, he'll be essentially a replacement level player or thereabout.
I know he dropped through 20 minutes a night this year going the wrong way, and I don't expect he'll be back at that.
Yeah, they almost never are. I mean, Dustin Brown, there's a few exceptions to that rule, but generally speaking, once you go down, you don't get back up again. When you're in your 30s in the NHL.
Hard to climb back up the cliff.
This contract is about what the Oilers should do on UFA Day on July 1st, and in building the team this summer. So, what would you say what's the number one thing that you want to see happen in terms of building this team, in terms of player procurement on July 1st?
Yeah, this morning I sat down to write a blog post, and I did a bunch of work on the Oilers, updating the Oilers roster, which I will publish at some point. And I was going to publish it and say the Oilers obviously need 2 things, a goalie and help on the wings. And then I checked out our blog, and there's a new article by David Staples saying the Oilers need 2 obvious things, a goalie and help on the wings. So I guess maybe I won't bother writing that post in quite that way. But it is pretty obvious that's what, I mean, they got to get a goalie. I mean, there's no choice but to go out and find an NHL caliber. Ideally, you get a guy who can play a tandem situation. And unfortunately, one of the best candidates today went off the market, Brian Elliott, who signed extension in Philadelphia, $2 million for a year. Veteran goalie, has performed well in the past, and historically he's been at his best when he's sharing the crease and not being counted on to be the number 1 guy. And that's sort of guy I'd like to see the Oilers go after. So there's one less goalie in the market now.
His save percentage the last 3 years has been .910, .909, and .907. And that's okay, right?
League average. Well, that's when you're talking about your number 2. But it's reliable and consistent.
Bruce, I don't think they can look at it that way. And I don't think Ken Holland's looking at it that way. I think he's trying to sign his number 1 goalie right now.
Wow.
That's what everything I've heard him, like, he's never said that. But when they talk about what the team needs, it's popping out of his mouth every second word as a goalie. And what was Koskinen's save percentage? 908?
Right in the same neighborhood as Elliott, same average, same save percentage. Listen, he just played more games.
You can't, and my cat's agreeing here. I don't know if you can. My cat is agreeing.
Yeah, I heard that.
You can't have that kind of goaltending. Now, there's a chance Koskinen will be better in his second season. That happens. There's just as likely a chance that he won't be, or he'll be the same. It's probably a coin flip, right? Whether he's better or worse, and we don't know which. And we know if he's worse, the Oilers are sunk if they don't get someone else in. So I really think they're looking for a number 1 goalie here. And that's why they've been trying to, the rumor has it, they've been trying to trade for Peter Mrazek, and who was the number 1 goalie in Carolina this year, it turned out. So let me just look up his numbers. And so there's a couple of guys who fill that bill. And there's Mrazek and Varlamov from Colorado. Varlamov, I think, had a 908 save percentage as well, not 2 or 909, something like that. He didn't have a great year. Mrazek was at 914 in Carolina. And the year before that, he played on 2 teams. He had a 910 save percentage in Detroit and an 891 save percentage in Philadelphia, playing about the same amount of time. The year before that, he had a 901 save percentage in Detroit. And the year before that, he had a 921 save percentage. So he's really been up and down but he's 27 years old, fairly young man. And I think that's why we're hearing that name, is they want to get the number one guy. And I think they are completely and absolutely right. That's what they should be looking at. And if it takes a little bit more money, like if it's a cost, where are we going to spend our money on? The owners might be asking themselves, goalie or wing.
Right.
I would put it at the goal position. I just think it's, when the goalie's on the ice, he's not your number 2 goalie or your number 3 goalie, or he's not on your 4th line goalie. He's your number 1 goalie. He's the most important player on the ice. And this guy's going to play 30, 40, 50 games. So
well, we'll see. I mean, it kind of, if they're still looking for a number 1, it kind of brings that 3-year at $4.5 million a year pact. That was Chiarelli's last action as Oilers GM. Well, second last action. His last action was packing his desk. I mean, that was the very last thing he did, and he was gone the next day. And if that's what the contract's for a guy that's going to be their number 2, then that's yet another disaster in a series of them.
He haunts us still. I had a moment today where I was assembling the post that you saw, and I was looking at the Oilers depth chart, and the one moment of anger I had writing that post, I don't always have moments of anger, but I sure had one this morning, and it was when I looked at Brandon Manning's.
Oh man.
Jesus Christ. Just what the heck? And the fact, that Hitchcock was in on that apparently, and Hitchcock is still an advisor of the team. Like, it was such a miscalculation at the time. They needed puck moving defensemen. They couldn't break the cycle. So they thought, well, let's get bigger. Let's get Petrovic and Manning. It's typical of heavy hockey thinking. Ken Hitchcock and Chiarelli were guilty of it right to the end, because they're heavy hockey guys. And I'm not saying there isn't a place for heavy hockey, but everybody knew the Oilers needed puck moving. And they couldn't even.
Well, I mean, Brandon Manning is going to replace Oscar Klefbom. I mean, just think of it that way. And as it stands, though, Brandon Manning is the number 5 left-handed defenseman in the organization at a guaranteed $2.25 million next year. And then you add in the other variables of acquisition costs, and the fact that he just isn't very good, and he'd had a terrible start to the season, was sitting in the press box for Chicago. It was a terrible team at that point, and he couldn't even play for them. And the fact that Oilers captain Connor McDavid had no time for the guy, at least previously. Maybe they worked that out. And that they traded one of McDavid's friends, Drake Kajula, to get him. And I borrowed a term from the famous astrophysicist Fritz Zwicky and called it a spherically bad trade. Spherical meaning that no matter what angle you look at it from, it's still bad. Like, there's no defending that trade. None.
All they had to do, Bruce, was bring Johan Ovitu back as your 7th D-man. Or they could have brought I guess, could they have signed Persson and brought him over this year, like this Joel Persson past year?
Possibly. I mean, they decided to lend him back to Sweden, but I think they had control over what he did next. And
all they had to do was have your 7th D-man as a puck mover, and then you're not looking for Lunk. Anyway, I'm sure Brandon Manning's a nice man and a good man, and he's just a terrible NHL hockey player at this point. And then Petrovic. The Petrovic trade, like, they compounded it, and it really spoke to what they thought was the solution, Bruce. They clearly thought they needed to get bigger. So anyway, the defense is kind of set. Like, I don't think we're going to see anything happen on defense. We'll get to that in a second. We might see we'll talk about the possibility of a buyout, but forward, when we look at the forward situation on the Oilers, so right now, the top line is Draisaitl, McDavid, and Cassian. The second line has RNH at center. And as far as I can tell, after RNH on the second and third lines, you have Joachim Nygaard, Sam Gagner. Is it Gustav Haas? Is that his name?
Gaetan
Haas. Guy who's not even signing, a guy we don't even know his name yet.
Sounds like he's coming over, but he's not even signed.
We got Cooper Marody, Tyler Benson. Then on the 4th line, Kobe Cave, Patrick Russell, Milan Lucic, Jujhar Khaira's in the mix, Yamamoto. So there's just after those four guys, Cassian, McDavid, RNH, and Draisaitl, they're really short on NHL hockey players. And I have high hopes for some of them, but whatever money you have left after the goalie, you're going to be spending on wingers. And so the question is, do you try to blow it all on one guy, or do you try to sign two or three? So what would be your
lots of talk about
Brett Connolly?
Brent Connolly from Washington.
Brett, yeah.
Who had a 22 goal, 24 assist kind of breakout season and not playing with top level line mates. Like really, he was on what was a very good third line for them. I think he played with Verana and the other Swedish guy that's a free agent, number 90 there, Johansson.
Lars Eller?
Oh, he played with Lars. He played with Lars Eller, yeah.
Burakovsky and Eller were his most common line mates.
Yeah, okay. And anyway, definitely kind of third line level. And he played some with Verana, but I guess not as much as with those other guys. But he wasn't like playing with Ovi and Kuznetsov and Backstrom, right? I mean, he wasn't playing cherry minutes with those guys. So the question remains, how would he do if he was playing with a top-notch center like Kuznetsov or Backstrom or McDavid or Draisaitl or Nugent Hopkins? We don't know. We do know that he's a bit of a sniper, but he's probably going to be costly coming off a 22, 46-point season.
So when you look at his even strength scoring, Bruce, it's been really impressive. Like I didn't just look at last year because anything can happen in that. I averaged out 2 years, and for all NHL forwards, he ranked 77th out of 451 forwards. Who I think
that's first line, right?
77. That makes you first line. Yeah, top 90 would be first line, correct? So
top 93, yeah, you bet.
Top 93. So I always forget about that extra one team now. So yeah, he's in terms of even strength scoring. So he's ahead of Nugent Hopkins, and he scored 2.28 points per 60, and Nugent Hopkins is at 2.14. He's easily the top, and he's ahead of Anders Lee, who's going to get much more money. He's ahead of Michael Furland, and Ryan Zingle, who are all going to get more money. They're next on the list, but Connolly's ahead of him. Now, listening to people talk about him, Alan May on Stauffer's show, and he doesn't sound like he's a fast skater.
Right.
And Alan May's concern was, can he keep up with faster players? But, I think he doesn't have to play with McDavid. He could play with Nugent Hopkins or Draisaitl, whoever is the second line center. And that might work out fine. So again, though, the question is, like, do you blow the wad on him or Gustav Nyquist? Or do you, or maybe Zingle, who's a fast skater? Or do you go with 3 or 4 guys, like try to get like maybe Brandon Tanev and Jonas Donskoy? So I'll tell you, my inclination would be to try to get maybe Chason and Tanev, or Donskoy and Chason, or we like 2 of those 3 guys, or maybe Tyler Ennis. But I'm kind of torn on that too, because there's so many. I really do like these young players coming up from Bakersfield, like Gambardella and Patrick Russell and Benson and Marody. So I guess I'll probably be okay if they go either direction. It's more opportunity for the Bakersfield crew, who really prove themselves, if they just blow it all on the one guy. So,
right.
What's your take?
Well, I really like Brandon Tanev as a player. And
he's a hard hitter.
Like every time I see Winnipeg, he seems to do something that catches my attention. He's always busting his butt out there. And he strikes me as being more of a depth winger, but I think on Edmonton, he would probably get a chance in the top 6 just because of the relative lack of competition.
He's not much of a scorer, Bruce, though, Tanev.
Well, 14 goals. I mean, you're looking at Edmonton's list, and there's not very many guys at that level. Cassian, who we're talking about first-line winger, he got 15 goals, and he was playing with McDavid and Draisaitl.
Fair. So like Tanev and Donskoy, does that kind of like, let's say they could each get, they could get those guys.
And he's a PKer, and for all that we need scoring on the wings, the Oilers, if they don't fix the penalty kill, they're never going to contend. I mean, it's just a disaster. They were 30th out of 31 teams last year in both penalty killing percentage and in terms of goals against, power play goals against, 30th. And
If they can get one of those guys on a reasonable contract, I'll be happy. Like Donskoy or Connolly or Tanev, and maybe one lower end guy like
Daniel Carr is a player of interest that had a big year in the American League.
Yeah, we hear about
roll the dice on one of those guys and actually have them work out. And I mean, last year they did, and he did in the case of Alex Chiasson. But one guy wasn't enough. But at least one of the bets they made paid off, and they're going to need to make some savvy bets on guys that don't break the bank. And
I wonder if Haas is a penalty killer.
I believe he is. I mean,
believe he is. So Nygaard is as well.
I mean, whether he's an NHL caliber penalty killer, we don't know in either case. Whereas in Brandon Tanev, I think it's, he played over 2 minutes a game on the PK last year, which is quite a lot.
I liked what I heard about both. I like those signings of Haas and Nygaard, and I like them because they're in their peak years.
Yep.
25, 26, ready to go.
27, actually, both of them.
Is Haas? I thought he was 25.
He's a 10-year vet of the Swiss League.
Whew. So, right in there, if they're ever going to be decent two-way hockey players, it's right now. They're not all banged up and injured, hopefully. but they're both fast too. I hear both of them are really fast. And so what about Chiasson? Are you very keen on him coming back?
I'm of two minds. Whether he prices himself out. And I mean, we're talking about the same thing with Brett Connolly. He scored 22 goals. And all of a sudden, he's, in another level pay-wise, and you would think the same thing would hold true of Chiasson. If you look at their career stats, they would have some things in common. They'd be mid-teen goal scorers that suddenly erupted for 22. And Chiasson has some nice things that we know about. He's a bigger guy, but he's not a fast guy. He's good in the net front on the penalty kill, but he's not on power play, but not really a sniper from the outside. So it's a very different player, I think, from Connolly. But it's one of those cases where if you don't sign one, you got to look at the other one, because somewhere they're going to have to find 20 goals. And I'm thinking Connolly is more likely to repeat what he did last year than Chiasson is, but that's honestly a guess.
Chiasson had a pretty hot shooting hand early in the year with outside shots. Later in the year, he mainly scored on the power play in tight, or he wasn't going to score at all. He wasn't going to score much at even strength. In fact, his even strength scoring last year, Chiasson's was really mediocre. So that's what gives me pause with him.
Right.
You hear good things about him though. Like, he's a good teammate and a hardworking guy. And
if he wants to sign for 2 at 1.5 or 1.75, then maybe. But if it's 3 times 3, like what you're hearing, then I don't make that gamble.
I just I kind of hope the Oilers don't sign anyone on day one and just wait for the day 2 things. I think the prices are going to crash fast because the cap is less than people thought, and the reality of this cap that they negotiated in 2013 is really hitting home. You can't. It's so hard to deal with bad contracts, so everyone's kind of stuck with them. You can't buy most of them out because they're all bonused up. And you can't send them to the minors because there are no movement clauses. You can't trade them.
They're hard to trade because everybody's got one now and they know what they're getting in for.
Yeah, you can't hide them in the minors like you used to be able to do. Where if you in the old days you could put the $5 million contract in the minors is off your books.
Wade Redden example where they had to change the rules because he kind of got screwed just because of the way it was set up. Now you can bury 1.0575 million of the contract, but only that amount.
So I think Connolly goes on day 1, but there's a chance that like Tanev and Donskoy won't.
Maybe.
And Chiasson, there's a chance he won't. And so you just kind of say who's left, and you go after those players, and you might get a bargain. like the Oilers got with that one really good year out of Chris Russell on a bargain. Of course, they had to wait till September for that to come about. But the Oilers, they do have, I think, some qualified fourth line players. I mean, if they just played their top line from Bakersfield last year, Russell, Malone, and Gambardella as their fourth line at Edmonton, I think it would be a better fourth line than the Oilers had this past year, Bruce. I'm sure of it. And
kill penalties better.
Kill penalties better, play better hockey, have some real spirit, real hunger.
Spend some time in the offensive zone.
I don't think they need to sign fourth line players, the Oilers. Like, they shouldn't be looking at signing anyone who looks like, oh, this is a fourth line player. Don't sign that guy. Because you have, again, Russell Malone and Gambardella. You have Josh Curry. So you have Jujar Kara. You have Milan Lucic. You have Colby Cave. You are stocked. You have Brodziak, who
you don't even want him on the team. But if he is on the team, he's on the fourth line.
No shortage of fourth line guys. So they got to splurge. They got to try to find one or two even.
Top six.
Third line guys. Second and third line.
Top nine.
Yeah, top nine. Okay. Defense. Okay, this is where we get into the serious buyout talk. Although Sam Gagner, I think, is also...
He's susceptible.
Yeah.
A case can be made for buying out Sam Gagner, which would be you'd save $2 million this year, lose $1 million next year, and then, of course, you'd have to hire his replacement, which would bite into the $2 million this year and add to the $1 million next year. So you're not really saving in the long run, but you might be improving your team in the immediate short term. If you can find a better player than Sam Gagner for under $2 million, then you're coming out ahead. But I mean, good luck with that.
Well, Tyler Benson or Cooper Marody.
Yeah, well, yeah, you don't necessarily have to sign him. I suppose you can just promote him within.
So
they can bury, like Vancouver did, they can bury Sam Gagner in the minors and again save $1.075 million there, which is half of what you'd save by buying him out without having any penalty the following year. So that's
probably the better bet, eh?
Andre, I don't think I'd buy him out. The D is where they're looking, and Sekera would be the obvious choice.
You know what I'm hoping they do, Bruce? I'm hoping they can find a trade for Chris Russell where they bring in a forward of equal value, like a third line winger for Chris Russell.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it's beyond, it's not out of the possibilities of what might happen. That would be ideal, that kind of deal. It would open up a spot on defense, and there's lots of defensemen who can challenge for that spot. And move $4 million and bring in a good winger. So you're kind of solving two problems at once. And
if the winger is good.
The winger is good.
The idea, I mean, you might get an expensive winger that's NHL caliber, but slightly overpaid. That's in that same range. The other alternative, which I guess its time really was last week, is to what San Jose did when they offloaded Justin Braun, who, if you look at his career statistics, isn't that different of a player from Chris Russell. And he's just entering the last year of a 5-year, $19 million contract. I don't know if San Jose fans are bitching about that contract the way Oilers do about Russell's contract.
Justin Braun just has better PR than Chris Russell.
Well, he's got a better partner.
Yeah,
he's been paired up with Marc-Edouard Vlasic all these years. Anyway, Philly took him on. They gave back a second and a third round pick for that. But more importantly, San Jose got cap space out of that. Of course, they blew it all on Erik Karlsson, but they did make that trade to give themselves some wiggle room. And so maybe there's a team out there that's looking for solid veteran defensemen like Philly was with Justin Braun. I mean, I don't know. They just bought out Andy McDonald, and then they brought in Justin Braun. So I can't figure out what Philly's doing half the time.
All right. So if you buy out Andre Sekera, Bruce, you get
$3
million this year, $3 million the next year.
Mm-hmm.
But then the 2 following years, you're paying an additional $1.5 million.
Right.
Tempting, but I don't. The Oilers need a puck moving D-man, Can you get a better puck moving D man?
Mm-hmm.
I guess what you can do is you could say, well, we can promote Caleb Jones. He's as good as Andre Sekera. I think that's probably a fair comment. It's going to be close next year about who would be just as good. And we could then use $2 million on a winger.
Okay.
But then the downside being in 3 and 4 years from now, when you have that 1.5 million below to your salary cap, but you might be thinking, well, I'll deal with that when it comes.
In my fantasy world, I'm not sure the timelines are going to intersect. Andrew Sekera mentors Evan Bouchard on the third pairing for a while.
I really like Andre Sekera.
That'd be ideal, but I'm not sure we're going to see it just because the one might be gone before the other is ready. But in a perfect world, that's a nice solution for your third pair.
Listen, if Sekera is bought out, some team should sign him because he can help you, and he will be signed, I think, because he's still a good hockey player. If you could get him for $1 million a year, wow.
Or even $2 million. It's just a 5.5. That's and after 2 injury-plagued years, we just don't know what we're going to get next year. If we get anything resembling the original Sekera, he covers a lot of that bet. But
I wonder what they thought of him at the World Championships. It sounded to me like he might have changed their mind about his future on the team from his play there, but we'll see. I mean, I think that might have changed again with the cap being about $1 million or $1.5 million lower than they thought it was going to be. So
yeah, nice of the NHL to announce that at the 11th hour, eh? Here, make your plans on your off seasons. Rehire your restricted free agents. Sign your unrestricted free agents inside your organization. And just before July 1st, we'll tell you that the salary cap is less than what we've been telling you all year.
Okay, Bruce, would you buy out Sekera or not? Yes or no?
I don't think I would this year. I don't think I would. And it's tempting. And maybe if it was the exact right situation that came along, but the timing, like you can't necessarily say, well, we're going to sign this guy, so we're going to buy him out today. Like the window closes before they even the buyout window, and then a second one opens under specific circumstances. Like they decided they were going to say take Puljujarvi to arbitration. Then there's a second window that can open up for buyouts, but
I say you wait to that second window.
I think Holland sticks with what he's got and sees what he's got, and if after this year, he's got 1 year left, then then you're looking at saving $3 million for 1 year, but only having that 1.5 million penalty for 1 year, and you take it halfway to the finish line and reevaluate. And I think Holland's going to be doing a lot of looking and evaluating what he's got here before he does anything crazy.
Yeah, I don't like the idea of those down the road having that cap hit. I mean, that could mean you lose a good player because you bought out Sekera now.
We're eating Benoit Pouliot's salary for 2 more years, and that's costing them a good player this summer.
Yeah, and they didn't even need to buy him out. They had all kinds of extra cap space that year. So
they could have kept him for 1 more year and at least cut the time in half, like I was just describing for Sekera. They could have done the same with Pouliot. They bought up the last 2 years of his deal, meaning they're eating the buyout for 4 years.
You're fading out, Bruce. Can you still hear me? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Oh, I can hear you now. You come unplugged there, man, or something.
Where's my thumb? Camera's over there, Bruce. Maybe you should point your thumb on it.
Okay. My final thought is this: we don't know what Ken Holland watched that farm team play, and for all we know, he's thinking, you know what, Joe Gambardella, he's ready for the NHL. He's going to be on my fourth line, on my third line. He might also be thinking Tyler Benson's ready. He's good to go. That's not the verbal we're getting, from the hints dropped by Stauffer that he's going to start the season in the Bake. But between Marody and Benson and Gambardella, Holland may be counting. And again, I don't think this is rash. Gambardella should be ready to play in the NHL. He's like 25, 26. So,
well, since the season ended, Holland's moves. He re-signed Shane Starrett. He signed Logan Day to an NHL class contract. and then he re-signed the entire line of Gambardella, Malone, and Russell. So 5 AHL guys he signed, and you know what? He still hasn't signed anybody from the NHL team. He's got Kara outstanding. He's got Puljujarvi, who I'm assuming is gone one way or the other, at least off the books for next year contract wise. And everybody else they let go who was involved in the big team. Ratty and Reeder are gone, and I'm pretty sure there hasn't been one NHLer that's been re-signed since Holland got here.
What would you do? Let's finish off with that then. What would you do with Jesse Puljujarvi, Bruce?
I'd let some team blow my socks off with an offer of some guy that can help them in the short term. And if he's not going to help next year, they might as well let him play in Europe and increase his value and trade him next summer. If they're trading him for a draft pick, they don't get to use that till next summer anyway. Might as well make it a better draft pick by letting the kid find his way back, to positive value. Like, I don't think his value will ever be lower than it is right now, coming off a miserable 4-goal season, -14, core body surgery at the end of it. I mean, there's a whole lot of red flags there, and that doesn't even count the red flags and stuff, we're hearing about, what's
Yeah.
player, which, I don't accept them necessarily, but there's some smoke there. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, which could be solved by maturity, right? And an attitude change, being a year older. I think it's crazy unless you get an offer based on higher value than he seems to have. You don't trade him. There's very little to be gained by trading him. I think he's likely to have a good year in Europe, and it's almost ideal in a way. It's almost kind of an ideal situation where you're saying, yeah, go to Europe and try to get your game back, get your confidence, get your health back, get everything back. If you want to come back and play for us, great. If you don't, knock everybody's socks off, and maybe we can even get a late first-round draft pick for you. Because
him being in Europe is no different than Philip Broberg being in Europe at one level. You're not paying him, I mean, he's if he doesn't even sign your qualifying offer, he goes to the reserve list. He doesn't even take a spot on the 50-man list. So he's out of sight, out of mind, but he's still an asset to your team. So, I mean, it's a little bit hardball, but guess what? Yessa and his agent have been playing hardball this whole time too. So
I don't actually see it as hardball. They're the ones who said they're not coming. It's either to another team or Europe. Well, then you say, okay, well, Europe, good idea.
Europe, then.
Yeah, this got a nice ring to it. It's just what we were actually thinking secretly, but we couldn't force you to go there. But good idea.
Yeah, the whole thing is just so unfortunate. It seems like a potential star player had fallen in the Oilers' lap, and the Oilers thought highly enough of their good fortune that they traded Taylor Hall about 4 days after the draft. Because they got another driver playing forward for them. It's obvious, right? I guess it's not so obvious. A long way from being an 18-year-old talented kid and being a difference maker at the NHL level. And unfortunately, Jesse Puljujarvi has never come close to bridging that gap. He just hasn't progressed the way that everybody thought he was going to. I know I sure did.
Yeah. And I wonder how much this year injury had to play in it. Anyway, let's leave it there, Bruce. And I will see you tomorrow night at the Oilers Prospects game.
At the Billy Moore's Cup. Yep. I got wrote up a post today on day 3 of the thing. And tomorrow we'll see the big finale where they actually play what looks like hockey as opposed to drills and skating exercises and stuff. So it should be a little more fun and maybe provide a bit more context in terms of how these guys actually stack up against one another.
Are they going to play 3-on-3? They must be.
It's such a small camp that 3-on-3 is really probably the only way that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
They've only got 18 skaters, so that would be, 3 full line changes on each team.
Thanks for talking, Bruce.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everyone.
And in the meantime, and in between times, this has been another edition of the Cult of Hockey podcast.